evening and welcome to our program, Jones and Company. This evening we take a moment to talk about a very topical issue in our country. We have joining us two very special guests joining us on our program, Jones and Company, none other than Ms. Chantel Hutchinson and Dr. Stephanie Hutchison from the Sister Breast Cancer Foundation. Good evening, ladies, and welcome to our program, Jones and Company.
Good evening. Thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure to have you on our program. Ms. Hutchinson, a pleasure to see you again. Recently, we did a radio interview talking about the Sister Breast Cancer Foundation, talking about the month of October and all of the activities geared towards raising not only awareness but funds to continue the work of the Sister Breast Cancer Foundation. For our audience that joins us this evening for this conversation, I thought we'd start by just talking about some of the events of October that have been held to support breast cancer survivors and their families.
So we've had a very, very busy October, a very busy one. Thankfully, we got through it. But I think we've raised a lot of awareness through the events that we've participated in, whether it was church, whether it was civic community services, whether it was going into the mall and spreading information. I think one of the aims and goals we had for October was to increase awareness, and I think we've accomplished that. But one of the things I also want to express is that breast cancer is not only October. Exactly. And that's another thing we're going to tackle. Like I said, we increased awareness a lot, but I want people to also understand, for a survivor, it's not only October, and we put away the pink, we put away all things associated with it, but there are other cancers out there, and breast cancer is just one of them. It's the highest one in this country, but we need to keep with the awareness. We need to keep moving and pushing forward to help corporate Bahamas as well as individuals and caregivers to support caregivers and understand that breast cancer is just not only October, and it's just not only the pink ribbon. But we've had a fantastic October. We've had events almost every day. Corporate Bahamas, civic Bahamas, individuals have been very good to us. And so we are thankful and grateful for that.
Right, and you know, the last time when we spoke on radio, we spoke about the history of Sister. Now I think nearing its 25th anniversary
Yes.
of creation, and we spoke about a lot of the support that Sister has received over the years. This month I saw as different corporate bodies, different civic bodies such as churches and even government offices participated in events toward raising awareness and also support. Does it surprise you, the outpour of support that you've seen?
It did. It really did, especially coming from governmental organizations. We've had requests from Urban Renewal. We've had requests from different political parties for their events to come in and talk and speak about Sister, and also to share a survivor story. So it was surprisingly, we've had one or two over the years, but this year it was a lot. It was much more than we've experienced before. And that says to me that the message is getting out there. The message is getting to the individuals that it needs to, especially, Bahamians that may not be able to afford going to the doctor or having a diagnosis of cancer. So I feel that we've reached a certain community, and that's a good thing. We've always had support from the churches. We've also had support from the civic organizations like Kawana, Pilot Club, Santa. So we've always had those individuals, but this year we've seen an increase from the governmental organizations, and we're thankful and grateful for that. We've also seen an increase from the hotels. The last event we had was on Friday, Friday, with Bahama. Their staff made a beautiful set of ribbons. I was very surprised. They had a ribbon competition, and if you see these ribbons, two of them were taller than I am. So it's getting out there. The message is getting out there. And Sister, like you said, has been around for 25 years. We celebrated our 25th anniversary in September. And I'm hoping the Sister is around for a longer time, but with less interaction, less requests from individuals. And if we, I know that sounds crazy, but if there are less requests, that means we are winning the battle against cancer. And so I want the organization to be around the next 50, 60, 70 years, but seeing 1 or 2 people maybe a month or even a year, because that means that we've finally broken through that barrier of having cancer, any type of cancer.
Right, and I know the last time we spoke, and speaking about the formation of the foundation and the healthcare professionals that were influential in its formation, and now the participation has grown, has swelled as well to include different members of the community, but particularly survivors of breast cancer. And noting you're a 20-year survivor, we spoke about your personal situation or your personal diagnosis, but to talk now about, and I'm sure this plays some part, your passion for advocacy when we talk about breast cancer or different forms of cancer, and what the Sister Foundation does. I read in a bio that you look at, of course, your work with Sister is almost as a civic duty. So in terms of what drives your advocacy, and also to pose that question as well to Dr. Hutchison as well, to find out what drives your participation with a foundation like Sister.
So when I was diagnosed, actually, that's when I started being involved in Sister. I was with Dr. Loxley Monroe. He was my surgeon at the time, and he introduced me to Sister. He was one of the founding members of Sister. And going through it, they provided a lot of the emotional support that I needed. I was very young when I was diagnosed, and honestly and truly, to be here 20 years later, I think it's my duty. It is my responsibility. It is something that God allowed me to be here for. And so I have to give back. I have to help another person, and not necessarily a female, but another individual walking through this journey of cancer. And I'll give you you asked me the question, but I'll give you a story. Yesterday we were in the store. A young lady came in the store and she said to us, I've been diagnosed with stage 4. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. And she was just talking, and I was just sitting there very silent. And I said to her, I raised my hand and I said, I'm stage 4. And after having the conversation with her, she said to me, I am so happy I came in here because you've lifted me. You've lifted my spirit. I understand, because she has a young child as well. And she said, you've lifted my spirit. And moments like that reinforces my responsibility and my reason for being here and being in Sister. I feel like I've survived for a greater purpose, a greater cause, not only for just my family, but for my community as well. So I think my work, my drive, my pushing, my wanting to have exposure like this and, corporate Bahamas and civic community is because I have a greater calling, and my responsibility is to make sure that I help the other person along the way. So that's why I do it, and I do it every day, because it is an everyday job. I do it every day because I truly feel that I'm part of my being here, not only just for my son and my family, is to help that next person, whether it's a male or a female, walk through this journey, because it's not an easy journey. It is not an easy journey, not only financially, but physically, mentally. And that's why, I dragged Dr. Hutchison here.
She dragged me in.
Because often we don't talk about the emotional impact of cancer and breast cancer, not only on the individual, but the family as well. And I think now is the time, and going forward for the next year or so, it's now time to talk about the emotional and the impact of cancer on an individual. It's almost like post-traumatic stress disorder. When you walk that journey and you come out, there's a lot of things you have to deal with, because sometimes for us, we're thinking you're going to die. And who wants to think that? So one of the things that we've decided after this month is to let's focus on that emotional journey now.
Right. That's very, very powerful, especially when you think about, Ms. Hutchinson, all of the persons who perhaps are diagnosed with a cancer, who receive a cancer diagnosis, who are able to find you as an inspiration or a source of strength to face their diagnosis and their issues. So let me ask the same question in terms of what drives your advocacy Dr. Hutchison, as well as, I want to ask you, and we spoke a lot about the diagnosis from and cancer diagnosis, certainly a significant event in the life of anybody, but from a clinical perspective, when a person receives a diagnosis like that, what happens to them psychologically?
And what do you want me to address first? What drives me or the psychological aspect
The
of
part
it?
that drives you first.
I think I echo some of the same comments that Ms. Hutchison did as well, that when you have this experience, I take it that this is not just for me, that I have to leverage my experience to help someone else, whether it's in education, whether it's in support, whether it's in sharing my story. Someone has to benefit from my experience. Someone has to have the support that I had when I was first diagnosed. I was diagnosed twice, first at 30 and then again at 53. And so my being here, as Chantel said, Chantel, it's like I'm Stephanie, Chantel, is that my experience must have been greater than me, and I'm going to honor God's life in me by being life to someone else. And so that is what drives it. And talking about the things that we don't talk about. A few years ago, I did a Pink Elephant in the Room series where we talked about the topics we don't talk about, like reconstruction, recurrence anxiety, if it comes back, some of the adjustments you may have to make physically after cancer treatment, because once the medical is under control, there's life after. And so you have initial diagnosis, mental issues, but then how do you live as a survivor after? How do you live after you've been diagnosed with cancer? So.
Right. And that point you raised about being diagnosed a second time and the recurrence anxiety, how does issues like recurrence or even the fear of failure of treatment, how does that affect a person's mental health as they are dealing with already a tough situation being diagnosed with cancer?
I think the first thought that comes to us, and I know it came to me, is that I don't want to die from this. I hope it's not spread. I hope they've caught it enough so that the treatment can be successful. And that's why I was talking about once you get the medical aspect under control and you're kind of, okay, all the treatment's done and all the anxiety and the challenges associated with that, how do you live with cancer? The recurrence anxiety, I'm sure Chantal has had the same experience when you go for your checkup every year and you're sitting in that room waiting and you're waiting for the doctor to say all clear until the next year. Particularly in the first 5 years, I found the anxiety was really strong, and then it kind of moved more to the back of my head. And so when it came 23 years later, I wasn't expecting it. I thought I was done with this cancer experience, but mentally it was the same journey. The feeling overwhelmed, feeling distressed. I don't want to go through this again. Drawing on my tribe, you all need to help me walk this road again. And so that was really key in terms of mentally and physically and emotionally and spiritually walking that. I had to have that village. People who, and I know some people pride themselves on being private, but to do this alone, to me, is not a good thing. That's why Sister is so important, so that even if you don't have a village or a tribe or family, this is your family, because this is a journey that you want to walk with your sisterhood with. Because I think it helps you, and it's going to get challenging mentally, but I think it helps you to weather the ups and downs of walking the cancer journey.
Right. I'm personally interested, Dr. Hutchison, you have a very impressive resume, seeing it even, in the realm of academia, Howard and Emory, and now you teach at the University of the Bahamas. But in terms of your professional training and dealing with a situation, as you mentioned, you're faced to confront even your own mortality. There are persons who speak about the diagnosis process as a grief process. In terms of your professional career in dealing with psychological issues and being a licensed clinical psychologist, you know, was there anything that prepared you for handling the emotions, the grief, and those sorts of things? I want to ask that question as well as, this one is another two-part one. What are some of the common emotions that are seen, I'm sure, in addition to grief when people
Yeah.
are diagnosed?
I don't know if there's anything that could prepare you for this, because the first time I was 30, I was like, who gets breast cancer at 30? So it wasn't even in my radar that that would be my experience. So that was a shock. And one of the ways I handled that was I called it like I was a computer. I just shut down until I could reboot and process the experience, because I think shock, even denial, is probably, that when you talk about the grief process, is probably the first reaction that we have. And unfortunately, some people kind of stay in that denial and don't move forward in treatment, which is not good. So I remember my doctor telling me, particularly the second time, she said, this is aggressive. Deal with this aggressively, deal with this quickly. And so I was able to, I keep talking about this, my support system, my sister, a longtime friend, they were like, you're going to move on this and you're going to move on this quickly. So I didn't have the luxury of saying, let me think about this a little more. They were like, we're going to do this and we're going to do this quickly. And so I had that kind of driving me forward, so that even though I had the strong emotions, because I taped myself. The second time, I taped myself. As soon as the doctor told me what the diagnosis was, I pulled up my phone and I just let the reactions flow. And then I listened to it later. But I didn't realize that that's how strong my emotional reaction was. I was saying, I don't want to go through this again. I was tearful, I was crying. But I had to kind of suck it up, because the battle was on. And I think a term that is usually associated with fighting and dealing with cancer, whether it's breast or other, if you have that fighting spirit, that you're going to be intentional, you're going to meet this head on, it kind of helps you in the long run in terms of survival and just meeting the challenge of the gamut of experiences that you're going to have as a cancer survivor.
Right. And, when we talk about, the emotions, the emotional aspect of it, and I spoke about grief earlier, and I was just reading today earlier something that spoke about the five-stage process of grief, and the aspect of it, the part of it where people ask why, or why me. I think it's called bargaining, where people questioning. Was there ever a time throughout your diagnosis where you questioned, well, why me? Or do you hear about people who are diagnosed who ask that question typically?
I think anyone who's gone through this experience would have those kind of stops along the way. I was going to say, I can't remember being angry, but I think I was. I remembered particularly with the first diagnosis. Angry in terms of, why did God allow this? And that I couldn't pray, and that I didn't want to pray, and thank God for the village, because people had to stand in the gap for me to kind of help me through that. And just feeling, when you think about even the depressive aspect of it, am I going to live? I want to live, or not even having the desire to want to get up and go, because this is a big thing. This is a scary thing. We talk about it now, but I think most people, and my experience before the diagnosis is, when you think cancer, you think death. And the reality is that some people do die from this disease. We all know people who have passed away since we've been diagnosed. And so you kind of live with that balance of life and death, and how do you kind of navigate that? That's why I think support is so important. Sometimes you need professional help. I was surrounded by psychologists, because you talked about Emory. I was on my internship when I was first diagnosed. So psychologists were all around me who I could talk to, and who were a sounding board, and who were there to kind of listen and direct and steer me towards people who were also survivors. And so kind of that's how I navigated that experience.
Right. Has the experience, and, from time to time on my program, Issues of the Day, when people call in on a daily basis and we talk about issues, people sometimes sort of make this point, the who feels it knows it sort of point. And, I sort of make a point to them all the time. I said, well, if you were diagnosed with cancer and you wanted the best doctor to treat you, would it be important to you that your doctor has himself or herself experienced cancer for them to accurately treat you? It's just a point that I make.
Yeah, not necessarily so.
But I wanted to know,
yeah.
to the extent that your diagnosis or experiencing cancer has, I guess, helped you in your professional ability at counseling grief, at assisting persons who may have issues with grief. And I guess, how has it, I guess, informed your complete journey in terms of, having the ability to tie your professional career with something that was at the same time so personal to you?
I think it adds another layer of sensitivity and knowingness about it, because with my second diagnosis in surgery, my surgeon she didn't have cancer, but it was in her family. And so she had had what's called a prophylactic mastectomy and reconstruction. So before cancer showed up, she had her breast removed and reconstruction. And so it was another layer of connection that she would know what my experiences was like surgically. But my oncologist had never had cancer, but she was knowledgeable and she connected with me in such a way that I knew that she was on my side and she was on my team. And so when I think about it from a clinical psychology perspective, I think having the experience brings another dimension than maybe someone who has not had the experience. But it doesn't mean that someone who is a psychologist who's not had cancer could not make those kinds of connections and support someone on the journey. I think being able to be empathetic and convey to the person that you're working with, I am with you, I can help you, I want to help you, I see you. Those kind of non-tangibles are much more important qualities than what your experiences have been. That's
Right.
been my experience.
Right. And having somebody with your expertise as a resource for Sister Sister must be rewarding as well. And to ask President Hutchinson, in terms of having a licensed clinical psychologist who's able to assist with the work that Sister Sister does, how rewarding has that been?
Very rewarding. What she didn't tell you is I don't ask. I just
Yeah,
send her.
she sends.
I send her WhatsApp and say, hey, what are you doing? I need you to see this person. I need you to talk to this person. Because I know sometimes in talking to individuals, I know that I can't help them any further. So that they would need a bit more than myself or any other member, sister, may be able to offer. So I have her in my arsenal and I say, hey, when she sees the hay, she knows what's coming behind the hay. I need you to talk to someone. And we don't pay, so it's just all free. So I like having her there because again, it's another resource, just like with Dr. Monroe, Dr. Diggis, Nurse McPhee. We have nurses, we have doctors in our resource pool that when I reach out, they don't ever say, well, no, I can't do it or I can't do it, because they understand the journey and the needs of Sister Sister. So we're thankful to them. And like I said before, this year, in doing all the things we did in October, we realized that there's an emotional journey that nobody really talks about. And so I'm going to keep her really busy this year.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep her really busy this year because I think we need to talk about it. We need to talk about being diagnosed. We need to talk about your options as a female, whether to have a double mastectomy, whether to do a double mastectomy without reconstruction, whether you do a lumpectomy, whether you do nothing. And there's a lot of women who decide not to do anything. And in some of the cases, unfortunately, their breasts start to fungate, they're living with, bandages, etc. So I'm thankful and grateful for her. She provides an invaluable resource to Sister, and we need to have that resource because we need to be able to talk to the women and men that walk through our door.
Yeah.
Right. And while we're talking about the mental health component or aspect of it, and I believe as it relates to wellness in general, that we as a country have become more, I guess, liberal or more inviting to the idea of discussing mental health, of disabusing ourselves of the stigmas of mental health that exist. but in terms of the aspect of mental health, in terms of dealing with illnesses in general, and specifically breast cancer, has it been traditionally in our country, the mental health aspect of it, one that hasn't been up until now so closely watched or focused on? And in addition to that, we spoke about, I know Dr. Hutchison, you spoke about your tribe earlier and your support system, and the different psychologists that were around you at the time. I think it's interesting too, because sometimes I believe families and support systems that are around people who are dealing with an illness sometimes need to understand better how to support them as well.
Right, right. And I think Chantal also mentioned that they need support too, because this is someone they love who has a potentially life-threatening disease, particularly if it's diagnosed late, which it tends to be in this country. But when we think about the mental health piece, not just related to breast cancer, mental health is more visible, I would say, but traditionally, and not just in the Bahamas, has not been at the forefront, because people tend to look at what are the medical issues first, not realizing that mental health is health too. And if that is part of the health package that we don't deal with, we don't address, then we're kind of not being comprehensive in treatment. And so I was very happy when I came back home in '97. I think we had a hurricane shortly afterwards, and to see that the Ministry of Health sent out mental health teams to deal with the communities that had been affected. So there was a recognition we need to address structural issues, food, clothing, shelter, but we also need to provide some psychological first aid. And so we've seen a growth in that, a more of awareness, a more of a sensitivity, and I love that and I welcome that, but I think more of it's needed, and I'm happy to hear, even though she's going to keep me very busy, that maybe we can see how we can structure some programs to be more, I guess, intentional and I guess forward in terms of what's happening before October, because as President Hutchinson said, people get breast cancer every month. They need the support every month. They need the finances every month. And so we need to be about this on a monthly basis, on a daily basis, and not just in October.
Right. If I was diagnosed with breast cancer, right, highlighting the fact that men can be diagnosed
Men can be, yes.
with breast cancer
Men can
too.
be.
But could there be too, when we talk about, psychological trauma that's untreated, could that have a physical manifestation in causing illness or worsening illness to it? There's
a term that's called psychoneuroimmunology. So the psychological, the immune system, psychoneuro, the nervous system, that they're intertwined, and that if we find that one of them may be a little off balance, that it can impact the other systems. I mean, think about it. I teach at the university. During this time of the semester, as we're getting towards the end, when students are more stressed, feeling more challenged, they're more susceptible to colds, which can impact their functioning in terms of being able to study. So that's kind of like a very, I guess, simple aspect of understanding it, that these systems are connected, and we want to make sure that they're all strong, because there was research done when I was first diagnosed, so this would have been '96, '97, that looked at individuals who had been diagnosed with breast cancer, late-stage breast cancer, those who had support, those who didn't, in terms of family and support groups. Those who had the support lived longer, about 5 years or so longer than those who hadn't had the support. So that's the environmental, social connection, all of that, the whole package. We want to make sure that all of those aspects are strengthened, because it increases outcome and prognosis. There's research to support that. It increases, it's a better prognosis for you. So we want to make sure that we are making sure that we're healthy mentally, we're getting the mental health support that we need, we're doing the physical health, the checkups, we talked about the preventive care, so that when something does happen, earlier is always better. Early detection, whether it's cancer, earlier it's always better.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, we talk about the high prevalence of breast cancer diagnosis in our country, but in terms of the trends to date in the Bahamas, in terms of, you know, even if it's demographics like age that make you more susceptible to receiving a breast cancer diagnosis, do we know about any of those trends? Are we seeing
I just talked about this with NHI, for NHI last week. The data the research that's been done in the Bahamas, I think it was through the University of Miami, maybe about 2009, 2010, 2011. What they found is that we have the highest prevalence of inherited breast cancer because of the BRCA1 gene. And when you have that gene, you have a higher risk of developing breast cancer than someone who doesn't. And so our rate, based on the research that's been done, is the highest in the world. And it's highest in the world, and we also see it younger. Like the average age in the US is 62, in the Bahamas is 42. And so that's a 20-year difference. And so the guidelines in the US are this, but that may mean, and I think we're still agitating and working for it, that because our the years we're diagnosed is so much earlier than screening has to start earlier. And Chantal and I were talking before we came in about how stage 3 and stage 4 is when women are usually diagnosed, which is technically considered late, as opposed to stage 0, 1, and 2, which is considered more early. And so that's kind of the pattern that we're seeing. Higher levels in the world in terms of the inherited breast cancer, BRCA1, younger age of diagnosis, later stage of diagnosis. Those are some of the things we're seeing.
Okay. All right, well, we have to take a first break on our program. Ladies and gentlemen, when we come back, we'll continue to talk about some of those trends, as well as other aspects of breast cancer and the Sister Breast Cancer Foundation. We'll take this break on our program. We'll be right back.